Today on How It's Made Dream Cars, the Morgan three-wheeler, a car with vintage looks and 21st century power. The Morgan Motor Company has been building cars here at Malvern Link on Pickersley Road in Malvern, England for over 100 years. The company was founded by Henry Morgan in 1910. The first car he built was a three-wheeled vehicle which he called a runabout. This is an exact replica of the first production model. The cars were soon so popular that the factory in Malvern had trouble meeting demand. The three-wheeler was lightweight, fun, and inexpensive, making motoring more accessible to the general public. It was also fast. By 1914, it had already established 10 British and world records. The new Morgan three-wheeler is based on the famous Morgan Super Sports from the 1930s. But with a high power-to-weight ratio and a top speed of 115 miles per hour, this is no antique. In a Morgan three-wheeler, the seats are fixed. That means if a driver wants more comfortable access to the pedals, they adjust the pedals, not the seat. The CNC laser device cuts slots in the steel floor panels. The slots allow for different pedal positions depending on the height of the driver. The machine also cuts the panel where the seat belts get bolted down behind the seats. A worker now uses a powerful bending machine to form another part. This is the gearbox fixing, which will be mounted directly to the chassis. The early Morgan three-wheelers had just 2 gears and no reverse. With a reverse and 5 gears, the modern-day version is thoroughly up to date. No monocoque for the Morgan three-wheeler. Here, they make the chassis the old-fashioned way. A worker uses a bending machine to shape tubes for the main chassis rails. These tubes are made of mild steel, also known as plain carbon steel. From the very beginning, Morgan three-wheelers have been known for their exceptional durability. Competing on muddy, bumpy courses in reliability trials during the 1920s, the lightweight, rugged three-wheelers were so fast, race organizers required that they start a lap behind their four-wheeled competition. A blade rises from a table to cut a tube that's been clamped down. This cut, called a scallop end, will fit to another tube at an angle. With each component of the car meticulously and individually formed like this, it's no wonder customers must wait at least a year for their order to be filled. The components for the rear section of the chassis have been formed and prepared for assembly. A technician now clamps each part in a complex jig system and tack welds them in place as he goes. The rear section of the chassis includes the seatbelt mounts, the rear fuel tank attachment points, mounting for the roll hoop bars, and the attachment points for the rear swing arm. Some parts of the chassis structure will be exposed. The mechanics of the vehicle are part of its appearance, so it's extremely important that the technician welds the components together with a focus on aesthetic appeal as well as structural integrity. In this sense, the three-wheeler resembles a motorcycle. In fact, three-wheelers are officially classed as motorcycles and even used to be called cycle cars. With the rear section fully assembled, it's now time to unite it with the rest of the chassis. That means a bigger jig. The technician clamps the rear section and then begins to add other components. Here's the floor panel with the different pedal positions. Next is the front roll bar. Once he's clamped all the components firmly in place, he begins welding. No longer tack welding, he uses a penetrative weld to fuse the joints together. Thanks to a low carbon content, mild steel welds easily. Once complete, the chassis is ready for a bath. 10 baths, in fact. This is a rust-proofing process called autophoretic coating. First, the chassis must undergo a thorough cleaning process before finally dipping into a vat of PVDC resin-based liquid. This material protects every nook and cranny of the steel. Finally, a technician wearing a full bodysuit and equipped with an independent air supply sprays the chassis with a coating of black paint. Bright multi-directional lighting ensures he doesn't miss anything. The chassis is now ready for the next step. There aren't many cars that require a fully operational woodshop and the technical skills of a trained carpenter. The handcrafted ash wood frame of a Morgan three-wheeler is one of its signature elements. A craftsman begins the process of laminating together sections of ash. Ash is the wood that Morgan has traditionally used to create its car frames. That's because it's tough, strong, and lightweight. The woodworker layers 5 plies of ash. He puts glue between each layer, ensuring the adhesive is evenly spread. Once it's glued together, he places the 5-layer laminate on a form. He bends it to match the form's shape and secures it firmly in place with straps. He inserts the form and laminate into a large vacuum bag and seals it. A pump sucks the air out of the bag, squeezing the laminate tightly to the form. This ensures the plies will cure in the exact shape of the form. The craftsman creates each of the components of the wooden frame with painstaking attention to detail. The woodworker now begins the assembly process. Drilling, gluing, clamping, and screwing the pieces together, he carefully and methodically builds the frame. While the curved wooden structure is reminiscent of boat building, the designers of the three-wheeler actually look to aviation for inspiration. And the completed car does look a bit like an old-fashioned airplane. This nod to aviation has historic significance for Morgan. During World War I, a flying ace named Captain Albert Ball drove a custom-made Grand Prix three-wheeler. He said to drive this car was the nearest thing to flying without leaving the ground. Tragically, Captain Ball was shot down and killed. To commemorate him, Morgan called their next model the Arrow. Here we see the frame begin to take shape. The craftsman places the bottom section in a purpose-built jig and wedges it into place. He then attaches a stabilizing bar to the front section. This stabilizer temporarily maintains the form of the frame. It will later be removed when the finished framework and body are fitted to the car. With the bottom section complete, it's now time for the woodworker to begin adding the top and sides. Next, he installs a curved section that will support the front bulkhead. He will install a second curved section, which will form part of what the manufacturers call the rear clamshell. The frame needs a skin. Here, workers form the aluminum body panels for the three-wheeler. This device uses 3 rollers that have been calibrated to bend a panel to a specified curve. Next, a worker uses a hand-powered tool to create a sharper curve at one end of the piece. This side panel will wrap around one side of the car, from the front to the tail. Before the panels can be attached, a craftsman applies a special adhesive to the wood frame. It's a 2-part liquid resin powder hardener, specifically formulated for laminating curved panels. Like squires putting armor on a knight, 2 technicians begin carefully installing the aluminum panels on the frame. This is the main part of the body. To ensure a tight bond, they secure the metal to the wood with closely spaced clamps. Taking no chances, they also screw the panels in place. This helps tighten the bond between wood, adhesive, and metal. Next, they add the front section, where the engine will eventually sit. The technicians install the side panels in the same manner. The panels feature 3 louvers on each side. These louvers are decorative features which resemble the look of the earlier Morgan three-wheelers. A worker brings the rear trunk lid to the car and attaches it. Then it's time to install the hood, which has a front piece called a cowl. The winged Morgan three-wheeler emblem is the finishing touch. Every detail of the Morgan three-wheeler has been considered. Not only does the car look like a small airplane on wheels, the leather used to upholster it comes from a manufacturer that supplies the aviation industry. A craftsman begins the process of creating the cover for the upper seat back. Using a template, he cuts out the shape required. Next, he starts marking out a quilting pattern. When customers order their three-wheelers, they can choose from a variety of different upholstery options. Not only can they specify the color they want, they can request special stitching patterns. Quilted leather is a popular choice. Even though the three-wheeler is a tiny car, it takes 2 hides to fully upholster one vehicle. Morgan sources a portion of their leather from a company committed to manufacturing with a low carbon footprint. They process the hides left over from commercial abattoirs and use waste products that would otherwise go into a landfill to generate heat and steam for drying leather and heating water. They also turn skin grease byproduct into fuel oil. To quilt leather, you need a good backing. The craftsman places the piece of leather over a piece of thin foam backing. He will then spray an adhesive on the unfinished side of the leather in order to glue it to the foam. Leather is the material of choice for upholstering cars, thanks to its unique qualities of comfort and durability. When cutting the backing, he leaves a margin that will be trimmed later. Once he's finished this operation, the material will be ready to head to the sewing area where quilting can begin. This craftsman stitches the pattern outlined in white. Working by eye, he must take care not to deviate from the design. Besides comfort and durability, leather has a long list of properties that make it popular with car manufacturers. Not only does it have a high tensile strength, it's also resistant to tearing, puncture, abrasion, fire, and mildew. It's warm in winter and cool in summer. Thanks to its ability to hold large quantities of water, it can absorb perspiration and later let it dissipate. When the stitching process is complete, the quilted leather piece returns here. The craftsman prepares the structural component of the upper seat back. Like the rest of the Morgan three-wheeler frame, it's made of wood. The worker sprays an adhesive on the wood, which will allow him to attach a piece of seat foam for cushioning. He then carefully trims the foam so that it conforms to the shape of the wood substrate. This cutout in the headrest will accommodate the seatbelt system. It's now time for the final step of mounting the quilted leather onto the substrate. Marking the backing to ensure that it remains perfectly aligned with the wood, the craftsman slowly and carefully attaches the leather with dozens of staples. For this task, he uses a gun powered by compressed air. It takes approximately 9 hours to fully prepare the upholstery for a Morgan three-wheeler. The leather worker needs 2.5 hours just to cut all the pieces out. The sewing and stitching requires another 4 hours, followed by 3.5 hours for this final step of mounting the leather on the substrate. The corners demand special attention and a special technique. This entire operation calls for patience, skill, and concentration. The leather must follow the contours of the substrate perfectly. No creases or bulges allowed. Seen without its wheels or engine, the Morgan three-wheeler looks like the cockpit of a World War I fighter plane, and that's no accident. Coming up, we'll see all the custom components brought together to form a finished car. Starting with the chassis, a technician begins installing all of the electrical components. This includes the leads to the coil pack and spark plugs, as well as the wiring loom, fuse box, and main fuse. Morgan has engineered the three-wheeler to start immediately, even after long stretches parked in a garage. The technician now installs the engine and transmission. The engine is a V-twin X-Wedge from S&S, a legendary manufacturer of motorcycle engines. With a top speed of 115 miles per hour, it has a maximum torque of 103 foot-pounds at 3,250 RPMs. The powerful battery will hold its charge for months. Like a motorcycle, the three-wheeler has something called rear swing arm suspension. This system grips the axle of the rear wheel and pivots up and down at the point where it attaches to the structure of the vehicle. Once the swing arm and wheel are in place, the technician installs the rear Kevlar drive belt on the aluminum sprocket. This system also closely resembles a motorcycle. Rotating the back wheel turns the bevel box and prop shaft. Next, it's time for the pedal box assembly, the accelerator, clutch, and brake. Once they're in, the technician connects their hoses and tests them to make sure they're moving correctly. Now, the leather-upholstered gearbox cover goes over the 5-speed Mazda Sports transmission. The technician works the stick shift through its sleeve and adds the knob. The next upholstered component covers the prop shaft. Then the door panels go on, followed by the lower and upper seat backing and cushions. The detailed, time-consuming work done in the leather department is finally on display. The seating design is snug but comfortable. Then it's time to put together the dashboard. The displays and switches here are directly inspired by old-fashioned airplane cockpits. To fasten the body to the structure, they will drill through the aluminum panels to the steel chassis tubing. Using just 2 attachment points in the front, 2 in the back, and 4 on each side. Each side of the three-wheeler features an exposed exhaust pipe. The technician mounts the oil tank in its brackets. Then he installs the front wheel on its hub assembly. The wire spokes and single wheel nut may resemble the style of Morgan's original three-wheelers, but they function as durable, thoroughly up-to-date components. Now it's time for the steel roll hoops with their leather headrests. The rounded hood with its signature front cowl is the next component. This is the liner for the small trunk area just above the fuel tank. Here in the finishing department, a worker uses a rotary polisher to buff the surface of the car. The car is painted the famous racing green, once seen on all British cars competing in European sporting events. Given how many races the original three-wheelers won, it's no wonder this color is a popular choice. With a maximum torque of 103 foot-pounds at 3,250 RPMs, the Morgan three-wheeler is a powerful car for its size. But it only weighs in at 1,160 pounds, a factor that contributes to its impressive fuel efficiency of 25 miles per gallon. In other words, despite its vintage appeal, this is a thoroughly modern sports car built for the 21st century. But then again, maybe Henry Morgan's clever idea just never got old. Fitting a motorcycle engine and a transmission onto a lightweight chassis with three wheels might be one of the best ways of combining fuel efficiency with the car lover's dream of flying on the road.